even after YC, a year later, we're still having conversations about what they're building. And I'm just like, what are your paid users saying? Right. And that SaaS is probably like longer cycles than us, and B2B is not easy. But until you actually crack like your first paying users, anything they tell you is like absolute bullshit. Right.
Correct.
Like then you make them pay, right? Like, and then
Absolutely.
if they don't pay, then yes, there's no point.
There's no
Right.
point.
So for us, that I think for a good year and a half, right? And very honestly, I'm very bad at it. I'm terrible at at sales, but like it was literally every founder like making the sales calls. Right?
Hi everyone, I'm Ankit and I'm the co-founder of PM School. In this episode, Nikunj and I talk to Kaustubh Khade, co-founder and chief product officer at YC-backed Spark Studio. Spark is an online learning platform for K-12. In this episode, Kaustubh talks to us about the importance of talking to users in the 0 to 1 phase of building a product. He also talks to us about how important monetization is from day zero, especially for Edtech startup, or for that matter, any startup actually. He also tells us a few funny stories about working with Michael Seibel of YC. We had a lot of fun doing it. Hope you guys enjoy it. So let's dive straight in. Thank you. For a lot of folks who don't know, Kaustubh is our national level kayaker. And he's also given quite a few TEDx or TED talks as well. And he also has a Wikipedia page, so he's officially famous. And Kaustubh, I've been following your blogs on Medium for a while, and also what you write on LinkedIn. You come across as someone who's driven by purpose, right? I somehow think that you're someone who finds purpose in a lot of things, or in probably everything. So again, is that a reason why your entire product management career has been in Edtech? Is that by design, or is that by chance? So you can talk to us about why Edtech.
Yeah. No, I think it's a fun story because I mean, after like you mentioned the kayaking, so I'd taken a break from product management for a year and a half and kayaked the west coast of India. And then
Awesome.
I took a break to reorient and then come back into product management. And when I did that, I basically joined Daily Hunt, and Daily Hunt is obviously well known for its news aggregation back then before the the merge.
Correct.
Branch offs, etc. Right. But more or less, it was just about ad selling and getting a lot of views, and doing a bunch of things to ensure that the views kept coming in, your DAUs are high, etc. Right, and your stickiness was got about by a bunch of factors. And once I was done with that stint, it basically came down to a couple of companies that I got through. One was Hike, right, and it was a fairly lucrative, fun position, and the other one was BYJU'S, right, and this is heydays of BYJU'S, like say 2016, 2017, when the product had just gotten out into the market and they'd seen some decent traction. But then it was a conscious call to go towards education because I didn't want to go and sell more stickers at Hike, and it just made more sense that this is a better outcome in itself, right? Do something that tangible meaning, etc. And oddly enough, once I joined BYJU'S, I think it was my dad who just called me and says, "Finally, you're in the family business of education." My dad's a professor. He's been a professor for I think 20, 30 years and has been in teaching. So I think some part of that is just rubbed off. And the way I looked at it at that point of time was it was either agri-tech or it was education that some impact. So that's where we are. We've been in education for I think the last 6-7 years now.
Got it. Very interesting.
Yeah.
So, Kaustubh, I was looking at your LinkedIn profile, right? You were there at BYJU'S for 3 years, and BYJU'S was doing really well, right? It was a big ass company, and you had a very senior position, right? And to be in that role, and obviously I myself, and like when we discussed with Ankit, when you have like a very comfortable role and you're growing really well in the company, and you might be very close to a problem space. I see that you were rather solving for K-12, the TG, right? The same problem space. Maybe obviously when you started realizing the problem really well, and you thought, okay, this is what makes me believe I might build a product. You could have built the product internally within the bubble of BYJU'S, but you might have got some conviction on like segueing and like when did you realize that you want to sort of start your own company? And essentially, for a lot of people who are in their jobs and are super talented, right? How do you sort of maybe get that conviction that, hey, I want to take that leap of faith and now maybe start my own company? Did you have like some groundwork wherein obviously you were working on a concept and like speaking to a lot of parents and kids, and that helped you like build that conviction? Or I'm not sure if it was like, hey, let me sort of do something of my own. Like, was it like an impulsive decision, or how did the transition from BYJU'S to like the co-founder of Spark Studio happen?
Yeah, I think I'll take that in two parts. The story at BYJU'S and what we were doing there, and how that culminated in something amazing. But also, and then the second part is obviously taking a call to go and start something on your own. So on the BYJU'S bit, I left them as AVP of product.
Yeah.
And I basically looked at the K-12 vertical for everything except live class.
Yeah.
So that's your your core or your flagship product, BYJU'S Learning app, a bunch of the acquisition channels that they had, including Discovery School Super League, one of their biggest CAC drivers, and this thing, a lot of the internal products that went on to for paid, etc. Right. Plus a lot of the new product development that we were doing in-house, where a lot of the upcoming tech was basically just piloted or given over to us, and we just like go and tinker around with it. Now, I mean, of course, now the view on BYJU'S is a little different, but back then we were still at the forefront of creating great learning products.
Yeah, for sure.
That's working with Disney and their content, behemoth, or building some of the pedagogy pieces that just weren't done anywhere, right?
Yeah.
And we basically had access to pretty much every educational tool out there, and insights into companies, etc. We were way ahead in terms of what we were building, whether that's truly adaptive paths. We basically championed that whole journey thing right at the start in 2017, 2018. A lot of the spaced repetition, mastery frameworks of learning, all of this productized, right? So not even like, of course, now everybody's gone live, and there's a whole thing about the teacher takes care of everything. But how do you productize actual learning? How do you ensure traversals on knowledge graphs? How do you do the truly personalized pieces? This is all something that me and the team like cracked back at BYJU'S. And this is quite a funny story, because I think in 2019 or 2020, and basically we were putting out some some PR piece on what the team had cracked that year, right?
Yeah.
Or this thing, and I was speaking to somebody, and I was just like, we've cracked personalization this year, right?
Yeah.
And 2019 was 2020, and then the person who was doing the video, whatever, she's like, but we've been talking about personalization for a while, so you got that whole fake personalization that everybody, not just us, obviously everybody in the market is going out and saying, hum personalize karte hai, it's every child and all of that sort of jazz.
Yeah.
It took us some time to build that and really tap into it in terms of, hey, now we've adequately said that this child understands or doesn't understand this concept. What are the the base concepts that we can give to this person? So that's your corrective or your scaffolding behavior. And then after that, how do you get them back on the path? Do you go back and gauge the things? And then that graph, or that the traversal of the knowledge graph for that user completely changes. So we were doing some fairly cutting edge stuff in terms of just productizing it, and it quite kind of showed in terms of what the metrics look like, which needles we are moving. Were we moving the P90? Were we moving the P10s? And of course, alongside you have all your other bits which are critical to a business, right? All your, your lead nurturing bits, or your sales enablement, and your lowering CAC, features, etc. So those were part and parcel of it. And I think for me, the final product that we actually worked on there was something in English, and I think that's where this conviction started to build. That apart from the curriculum subjects which everybody's going after, right? From your Vedantus to, pretty much everybody else covers that, right? What we realized was that there's a massive need for English, and it's completely unaddressed in all schools that are not ICSE metro, right?
Yeah.
So even in ICSE non-metro, the medium of learning is not English. And we had like some very interesting insights here, because when we started to build that product, we basically tried to get close to the consumer there, right? And say, hey, what are we actually building for? And what we did was we actually went through our customer care folks, because apart from the product, there's a service layer at BYJU'S, which is somebody calling your parents up and saying, hey, this is what your child learned, this is where the lacunae are, this is what they need to do in the next fortnight or whatever. And we just had open conversations with these folks and said, hey, what is the journey of that call look like? Forget about what you talk about and this thing, but what does that look like? And 9 out of 10 times, what these guys would do is they'd call the parent, and it was invariably the mother. And they'd say, hey, your maths is this thing, she needs to do circles again, or your physics there's some problem with linear motion or whatever, that sort of thing. And the parent would be like, and then after a while, they would literally be like, hey, you know what, before you hang up, just talk to my child, right? And our customer care person was like, it's more of a mentor. So the mentor would just be like, sure, what do you want me to talk about? She's like, kuch bhi baat kar lo, but English mein baat karna. Okay, so this was 5 minutes of speaking to somebody in English who understands English. And obviously all our mentors were speaking in the regional languages with the parent, right? That was so sought after, that there's this thing. And the more we explored that problem, we realized it's just there's nobody for these kids to actually talk to in English, right? So there's no, the teachers are obviously not speaking in English, the parents don't know it. If they talk in school in English, they're like laughed at, right? And this is back, I think 2019, 20 or so. That's when we said, hey, this is quite a sizable problem, right? So we started building for tech in English, and around that time is where you had Dialogflow erupting, you had speech to text pieces. We actually worked with a fairly big player to help them build their voice models, which were non-existent for children back then, right? And then we didn't really do TTS because BYJU'S is always like the quality of the product and that whole experience bit. So we didn't delve deep into the text to speech bit, but everything else was built and done in such a way that a child could speak to this person and it's judgment free and it's fun, right? So for me, actually, having done all of this, because I'd done the CAC, I'd done the the product iterations, I'd done the the learning bits, right? You've done the new product development. Of course, there are infinite opportunities in terms of integration / BYJU'S acquiring every company under the sun at that point of time. So there were all those bits. But in terms of the learning and what else I could do within that curriculum piece, I think I'd hit that ceiling. And had built a team that could actually continue that as well. So I think when I left, there were about 14 folks under me, and everybody had some amazing product or amazing thing to work on, all of which was very, very interesting, and well set up, well oiled and stuff like that. So that just made it easier for me to say, hey, I really like this this problem that we have, right? English and public speaking and confidence in a sense, because what we realize is kids basically lack confidence. The kids are very smart, but they just can't articulate their problems, and they can't really speak to people. And I think that skill exists, right? I think product management also exists for part of that reason, that we can actually tie those things up, or bridge the gaps there. And seeing that firsthand in not just the work environment, but even back at IIT, right? You have the sharpest people in the world, and nobody's able to articulate a thought, right? And so it's a fairly big problem. And personally, I've always been very pro extracurriculars with the sports and public speaking and debate, so on and so forth. So for me, it was a no-brainer to say, hey, can we do this for most of the world, not even because most of the world is not English speaking, right? It's called English as a secondary language, and that's a large percentage of the countries out there. So, and ironically enough, like speaking in English is directly related to confidence. So, so it is a very prevalent, important problem to solve, and that's how Spark Studio came about to solve the confidence problem. So even the three verticals that we chose were along the lines of freedom of expression. So we did communication, we did music, and we did art, right? And to date, I think we've kind of reduced our importance on art purely because I think consumers don't necessarily pay these kind of price points for an online art class. But with music and with communications, it's still going very strong in terms of parents in in Allahabad. They're doctors. They're both doctors, right? They have two kids, and they speak in English, but they can't get the child to speak. Right? And they come to us and they've said, like, just get them to this thing, and basically. And this father would call me like after every class, saying, today's class was 57 minutes. Like, why was it not 60 minutes? Right? Like, where is the homework? Right? Like, is baar usne homework hi nahi diya. There are days that you don't like, there's some lesson plans that don't necessitate a homework or something. Right? And then we're calling up the teacher and we're like, what's happening? Like, did something go wrong in this class? And then that same parent, like later I called him back and this thing, and he's just like, it is amazing. And I said, what is amazing? Like what was so this thing, like cracked a debate, or he's gone and said something in a competition or something like that. And this parent's response was कि जब मैं dinner पे बैठता हूँ और मैं English में सवाल पूछता हूँ, वो English में जवाब दे रहा है. That was like the winning moment for him, right? कि the child is now like is getting out of his shell and like in English. So
this was at Spark.
That's Spark Studio. Yeah. So yeah, it's just phenomenal when you like hear these kind of stories, and a lot of like the first year was just us calling, sales, post sales, pre-sales, whatever, like this thing. And seeing these classes, etc. And you could just see hey, there are kids, and I think the other thing that was quite interesting is we've always been pro the 1:X model as opposed to 1 model. 1:1 is very easy for like a bunch of logistics, teachers, like sales, all of that sort of thing. But we've actually seen the 1:X model just be better for learning. Right? Because you're suddenly in a class and sometimes they're just learning off of another student. Right? There was this one child, he was 8, right? And somebody said, like, go sit in this class, like you really have to see this class. So I sat there, I think it was like Friday afternoon or whatever, and this thing, and these girls started talking about who inspires them, right? And I thought maybe like 8-year-old probably going to like riff off of some Cartoon Network kind of thing or whatever. And this girl, she's like, I really look up to Frida Kahlo. And I was, for a moment, I was like Googling Frida Kahlo. I was like, I know she's a painter, like, some something. And then like they started talking about this, and my biggest fear at this point in time, because it was a live class, right, is like, will my teacher be able to handle this? Right? Will my teacher be able to handle 8-year-olds talking about Frida Kahlo in a class thing? But basically, and then the class got over, and this child was staying back because she was talking to the teacher. And the other kid, like, said, hey, so and so, can we stay back for a bit? Right? And she's like, yeah, sure, but you can just ask me now, not even caring, there's like a 35, 40-year-old, this thing, teachers just waiting on both of these kids. And she's just like, hey, so yes, last time you told me like we do our homework together, but we didn't do our homework together, right? So can we like schedule like doing homework together, and all online, right? Like, so it's just the cutest thing. So I mean, a lot of them are just learning off of each other. These these relationships are happening, and I think sometimes for us, and that's another good thing that I quite enjoyed about branching off of curriculum and That whole piece is for us in extracurriculars in the space that we're in, engagement is learning. The more they engage, the more they're learning, right? It's not, it's not like a math thing. You're gaming the, the drag or whatever other mechanics and then getting through, right? For us, the more the child speaks, the better they are. The more they sing, the better they are. Right? Draw. So there's a direct this thing. So I can just say, hey, child has been engaged for 57 minutes and it's been amazing, right? So yeah, so that's what Spark Studios like. Fairly fun times.
Awesome, yeah. Like I can relate, when you said non-metro and ICSC, right? Because I have that same intersection.
Yeah,
I come from Lucknow, and sometimes the mode of communication wasn't English.
absolutely.
And my parents always want, like they focused a lot on spoken English. And they would always want me to speak in English at dinner table. And then I can relate to the story of that dad from Allahabad, which is obviously nearby Lucknow. Right. That's and when I see my cousins now, because when I joined engineering, I did feel a cultural shock because people could speak in English and they sounded just confident to me.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
They were coming from maybe a metro city.
Yeah.
And I think quite a few weren't even from ICSC, but that doesn't matter. But the idea is just speaking English brings so much of confidence in a person, right, in India.
Yeah.
Very interesting, right? I want to I have a follow-up question. You mentioned, Nick, like when you're doing 0 to 1, you don't have data with you, right? So you rely on insights like these. यार मैंने father से बात करी, या मैंने I talked to this girl who was interested in Frida Kahlo, right? So how do you approach building a product in a 0 to 1 phase? Especially for folks who are looking to maybe start up, right? Because a lot of the times we might read, this is the TAM, or this is a space, and let's build accordingly. But you went user first, right? You went customer backward, like understood their pain points and actually talked to the user, and that's how you built the initial, let's say, an MVP, I would say.
Yeah. So I think one thing we got right, like with Spark Studio from the start, is we started selling like from day one. So we've been a revenue generating company.
Yeah.
I think the first week or the second week, right? Because like there's literally no substitute to somebody paying for something and then telling you what they want.
Correct.
Because this guy in Allahabad, like he would have like come and thrashed me if like I hadn't gotten his child to that level, right?
Correct.
He's paid for it, right? There's a reason he's calling me and saying 57 minutes and not 60 minutes, right? The same, because he wants his money's worth. So for us, and this is a big problem, right? Because we've seen this with not just like other companies, but other YC companies as well, right? And YC batchmates, right? Even after YC, a year later, we're still having conversations about what they're building, and I'm just like, what are your paid users saying, right? And that SaaS is probably like longer cycles than us, and B2B is not easy. But until you actually crack like your first paying users, anything they tell you is like absolute bullshit, right?
Correct.
Like then you make them pay, right? Like, and then if they don't pay, then there's no point.
There's
right?
no point.
So for us, I think for a good year and a half, right? And very honestly, I'm very bad at it. I'm terrible at sales, but like it was literally every founder like making the sales calls, right? And saying the same, because you've given away your live class, your free live class session, right? And you've seen that the quality of the class is great, so you're not representing, or you're not doing a disservice by putting out this product or whatever. You put out a product, it's a fairly decent product, right? Now you make the sale, right? And in that moment you basically realize like, is this useful or not, right? Are we doing the right thing? And that was literally the only proof of the pudding, right? I mean, very honestly, I think I brushed upon this, but at BYJU'S, I'd not done live class, right? I'd not built live class. I knew of it. I knew all the metrics. I knew what's important, etc. Right? More importantly, I knew what is not important as well. So you have all of that, but until you make that sale and you made it on like the actual merit of the product, right? Not some cross, like some poor sell or, or some FOMO based piece or whatever, right? Until you've done that, right? And then we also like stuck around, right? Because we would, these parents would call us directly, right? That there are a bunch of parents who would just like call me directly or call, Namita and Anushri directly and just be like, hey, what do you have next? Like, what else can I teach my child? Right.
Interesting.
And there's some of them we just ran out of courses, we're just like, कुछ है ही नहीं है, बाकी ही नहीं है, like बनाना पड़ेगा आपके लिए.
Correct.
So and then those are the people that you can actually like listen to and they're the thing. So I mean, and through the pandemic, we are fully cognizant of the fact that we may have been just like glorified nannies, right? But still, like ours was the only class that that they kept the video on, right, or they weren't on mute, right, and that like earned us a lot of cred, right?
Credibility, yeah.
And then basically staying the course, because we didn't front load, we didn't say ki like 100 classes from this thing. I think even today, I think we just have a couple of courses that are 100 classes long, purely because I mean, with every other player, they buy into it, they buy the 100, then literally what everybody told us ki like, hey, after 35 though it was all shit, right? After 40, like kuch hua hi nahi, there was no learning, right? But we never did that. So we always sold piecemeal. We always like loaded up once the child finished and this thing. And basically that also meant ki like we didn't have any place to escape, right? It wasn't ki like ye bech diya, fir sales wala usko rakhda ke rakhega types or whatever, right? We had to make the second sale, right? That's the only way the unit economics work, right? And
absolutely,
the product just had to be good.
Correct.
So I think some of those were like conscious calls and more mature calls than anything, right? Like I don't think a 23-year-old probably going into YC will like this thing, because these playbooks were already done by with BYJU'S, with Antu, whoever, right? This thing already front loading 3 years, 5-year packs and selling it, and then there's some audit team and there's the numbers that you put out and all of that sort of thing. But we didn't take that path, and we were like very clear ki like if it doesn't work, then what's the point of like continuing?
Absolutely correct.
So start small, but make the first sale. And like super critical. I mean, we heard this right through YC. Like the founder has to make a sale. You cannot like a sales head until you know how to make that sale. I still don't know how to make the sale, but luckily somebody in the company does, and now we've got a sales head. But yeah, very important from a product perspective, because my calls would probably like, whether it resulted in or not, they were just like really long, deep conversations with parents saying, hey, but why didn't it work out for you, right? Like forget it, like don't pay me, don't buy it, right? But tell me ki like at what point it turned sour for you, right? And we like try and figure that bit out. Yeah.
Correct. I think like the biggest takeaway in the last 5 minutes would be like always have a monetization from day zero.
Yeah.
Or be selling, or at least try to have a monetization strategy, right?
Yeah.
Second thing is always talk to your users when you're building 0 to 1, right?
Yeah. No, absolutely. Like, I mean, because early on, like, your first people are oddly enough just going to be friends and family and stuff like that.
Correct.
Still going to say like बहुत बढ़िया था, like
absolutely.
तुम्हें तानिया को like engage रखा, but then oddly enough some of them don't renew. This is like ठीक है अगला वाला नहीं कर रहा है, ठीक है कि तानिया आज ये कर रही है, सालसा जा रही है or something like that.
सालसा जा रही है.
It's different. So anyway.
Got it. Kaustubh, so I obviously got the transition and how you started. And when you start, you have a certain use case in mind. For example, you were solving for English, right? And you understood that's a problem. And the problem space was maybe not to solve for English, but going back to that struggling point that you said, right? The kids needed confidence.
Yeah.
And English is that medium, which obviously was a major insight, right?
Yeah.
Now, for you to build those adjacent use cases, right? Like, what do you teach them next? How did that insight come? I'm not sure if it's so. As a product manager, also, you essentially go through that journey of discovery, right? And you have your own mental models. You figure, okay, I'll speak to users, but it's sometimes not easy to speak to you. It's easy for you to have an insight and build for that, and you learn from that. But now, for you to come with the adjacent use case, do you ask them? Because you cannot always ask the user, right? They will say that I need X, and going back to the monetization problem, wherein they might not pay for that X that you end up building.
No, makes sense. Actually, I mean, two things that we did like similarly here, right? And very honestly, while like English was a major problem and we were solving for confidence, the first thing we actually put out was storytelling. It wasn't English or spoken English, right? And English evolved because basically we started realizing that, because your first set of users through, whatever bias or whatever are people in other, apartment complexes like ours, right? Where they know spoken English, right? For them, learning how to tell a story or debate or speak in public, that's the part that like needed the ice breaking. Right. And then as that evolved, and then we moved out of like just necessarily metros and this thing, I mean, we realized our trial classes were failing because the kid is not speaking English. So we started like, hearing on customer care groups that, hey, can the teacher speak in Hindi, or can the teacher speak in the local language or whatever. Right. And then that problem statement started changing. And then we started putting out like adjacent products, right? We did phonics because what we realized is a lot of them want to start a little younger, or before they go to school, they want to pick up, phonics properly, right? And that they're happy to do online. So a lot of it was basically just as our funnel started changing a little bit on who's coming in, right? We basically had to build products for that funnel. And even then, I think just taking, like conservative decisions to test out things. So you wouldn't go out and just like get, 20 Hindi speaking teachers or whatever. You just look at your existing teacher base and say, isme se kisko Hindi aati hai? And then like going out and like piloting maybe a trial class for that specific, funnel that is getting those type of users or whatever the ad set is or whatever. So that's where I think, some amount of, like quick product management helps key. Okay, this ad set is just giving me these guys diverted to a different landing page, tie this one teacher up to that, to any slots coming in from there or whatever. So that part was this thing. And I think to that effect, it was, I think some of the things that kept us agile was, building out a bunch of that LMS scheduling, all of the backend pieces that made the whole thing quite flexible, right? So we didn't get, and I think some of the other good product management decisions we took was not to get tied into building an SDK based, white label solution or some such thing, ki classroom banayenge and classroom solve karega and all that sort of stuff. We said that doesn't matter, right? So even to date, like embarrassingly enough, I think we still run on Zoom, but the parents are like, have gone through that wave, so they're still okay with it, right? So, and 9 out of 10, everybody's just like, no, but there's got to be a red button, it's got to be here, and then you've got to get these emojis from this side and some other thing. And we were just like, nahi, but like we just have to test out key, does it work or does it sell and this thing. So that kept us on the core problems, and as those problems like kept changing, then we could move quite swiftly. Like I think the biggest tech that we built was the LMS, and tying that into a bunch of the scheduling problems or the management of class bits or whatever. So to date, I think because we also speak to like a lot of other edtechs in the B2B space or whatever, and even people who've raised like 40-50 million, they're like, hum abhi bhi spreadsheet or manual WhatsApp pe kar rahe hain, and like we mostly automated all of this and like experimented with this like ages back. So yeah. So I think adjacent problems and the consumer pieces, the other bit that we put out was we put out an app, sometime last year, and the app was a CAC driver, right? To say, hey, we'll funnel people through it and onto the live class. So that's literally what we've been doing at BYJU'S as well for years, right? And there you basically start off with the hypothesis and say, hey, like the hypothesis is that, kids love games. They love this thing. They're searching for these games, And that's your basic hypothesis. But then after that, it actually just went to us going and meeting a bunch of users, right? And just us founders, right? It's not, I have it like I've outsourced this to somebody or the other. We were driving to far-flung places in Bangalore. We traveled. When one of us is going to Bombay, we just like say, hey, in Bombay we've got these 3 users, I'll schedule, calls with them or whatever. And then we go to Bandra and Khar and Borivali and whatever other places, and then just sit with them and just like see what's actually happening, right? And specifically like get your first prototype out, go and give it to them. Nothing like, them actually playing with it, because it's very different than what you imagine, right? Ki this thing. And I mean, the good thing with my consumer is कि वो उसके चेहरे पे दिखा है. You can see like this child is like frustrated or irritated or hates it or likes it or loves it, so just sitting in that natural environment, giving them the app, and this child just like gives it back to you in like 2 minutes, and you're like, fail ho gaya. You're like, what is the issue, right? Like this thing. So that's been fairly critical, and we've taken that very seriously. Like from this thing, even at BYJU'S, I think like I actually fought to get a UX team, say a user research team for my English product, right? And we did some very rigorous testing in schools, in person, all of us going and meeting them. That has been honestly the thing, because there's everything else that is metric driven, and you will see like your product not doing well or whatever. But there's that subjectivity that this child is not like this color for some reason, right? This is not interesting enough. This button didn't show up in this child's face only, right? We were like made it big, bright, and this thing, but it's not enticing the user. He wants to go and play somewhere else or whatever. So you change your workflows or you change your screens or whatever. So some of those have been and those bits are fairly not conventional, you'd say. They aren't things that like are very obvious to you, right? And obviously all of us, even with years in that space, still like have a blind spot to certain pieces. So like one example that I always give is when we were at BYJU'S, one of the critical pieces we wanted to understand is who's the person who's installed the app, because that informs you on, is this a purchase intent? Is this a play intent? Is it a learning intent? If it's just before the exams, is it to, revise something or whatever? And so one of the first screens that I put out there was saying, key. It was a really beautiful screen, right? It had a scroll bar between them, and if you scrolled right, it swiped in, parents, and if you scrolled left, then it, brought in images of kids, and it was very beautiful, right? And it says, "Ki I'm here as a, parent or child or whatever." It was like visually and like UX wise looked beautiful. And then we gave this to, like, in prototype testing, we just went to the ground floor with the content team and just met parents, right? The same said, ki, hey, like this thing. And like 9 out of 10 of these parents said child, right? Just like, I'm here as a child. And we're like, dude, what the fuck? Like, can't you understand? Like, you're a parent, parent pe click karna. And the, like, once I tell you, it's just so simple and just makes so much sense. But the insight was that they wanted to see what the child would see, right? They didn't care about you and your flows and, like your business objective or, this thing, give away this thing. They just wanted to see what mera beta kya degi ya meri beti kya degi, uska journey kya hoga. So then we actually flipped it, and then we said, ki, like, are you here as a parent, right? And the idea there was that, the child would say heck no, right? So we were counting more on the child saying no rather than the parent this thing. So anyway, I think, and then that stayed constant. The number like stayed constant no matter what our acquisition, funnel or strategy was. So we thought that kind of made sense. But again, like an insight that's like, it seems really obvious. It seems obvious once you like know it, right? But until you see it happen or not happen, you're not really questioning it. Yeah. So.
Super insights.
Yeah.
Awesome, yeah. Changing gears slightly, Kaustubh, right? You are probably the only one whom I know who's a YC alumni. So talk to us about, how did you guys get shortlisted in YC, and how much, like, is it worth the hype? Like, I hear a lot of people saying that, like, probably the YC network is as tightly knit as the IIT network, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Talk to us about getting into YC and how has that
Yeah.
helped you beyond, just the funding.
Yeah, I think getting into YC was also like a fun moment, because we just launched, and I think we were like a couple of months in, and then we put it out there, and on paper, like, our team is like damn solid, right? Because we've got, like, I have tons of years in product, plus worked in BYJU'S, our tech co-founders built backends for housing and Zynga and BYJU'S and stuff like that. Our curriculum lead is Namita, who's built the curriculum at Lead, and Anushri, who heads business, is basically head of business at Swiggy. So, and then we've got our own people from all of these companies. So the team looked like damn legit and stuff like that. And we'd already started revenue, but it was just like we just started, and I don't think the numbers were rosy by any picture. And so we shot off the application to YC, and didn't hear back from them for like a good month or so, right? And oddly enough, then like, at that point in time, like some other we had some funding issue or something like that, and we were just like we really needed it. We just shot off YC, saying, okay, whatever, what's the harm in shooting off YC, because we already had like funding secured somewhere else, and then some other jewel happened, and we weren't so sure. So I mean, like, oh fuck, we really want YC to come in, like we need this cash right now. And so then I wrote back to YC, right? Like, just, and I don't know if most people can know this, but you can just write back, right? You get once you submit the form or whatever, you get an email from them, and that same email address you can write back. So we're like, okay, let's let's just write back. And I wrote back, and I said, hey, it's just been a month, and this has been our growth in the last month or so, right? And this is what our kids are learning after one class. And I sent we had this course called stop motion animation, where you take frames and then you put it together as a video. And there was a 6-year-old who made a stop motion video of just a papad, right? Like a papad with a blue background, baby blue background, and then it goes tuck 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 tuck. It like it's roasted, and then he eats it. Like, so there's this thing, and there's like just this song playing in the background. That's it, right? And it was, I think, some 6-second video or whatever. And I shot this off to YC, and I said, this is what our kids are doing, one day after class or whatever. And then obviously the numbers and stuff like that. And then we got a call from them. And then I think YC, I think everybody knows, it's just a 10-minute call that happens, and you spend like a good week prepping for that call. And then oddly enough, my co-founder got COVID, so she did this call during, like, while she had COVID. So superb resilience. And our call actually stretched longer. It went to like 15 minutes or so. And they asked a bunch of questions. And then that morning, I think none of us could sleep, because they tell you at like 6 a.m. or something like that. And this thing. And we frankly thought it wasn't there, but then like finally got the call, and we were through. At that time, Tim Brady was with YC, and Tim Brady basically championed the education vertical at YC. So that kind of worked for us. And was your other question how YC was, or what was that again? Like, I missed the second part.
How has YC helped, like, after the fundraise, right? Beyond the fund.
Yeah, so I think not just like the fundraise, right? Because I think in India you could probably raise, you could probably get a good this thing, etc. YC was fairly critical from setting some really simple business like goals, right? And they kind of, it acts as a forcing function, because what they do is through those 12 or 13 weeks, you basically have to grow. There's no other alternative, right? So of course, some people are still bucking the curve and doing your prototyping and not this thing, etc. But the fundamental piece there was just revenue. Like, you're here because you have to grow into a $1 billion company, right, or $100 million company, and that's the only reason you're selected, right? So if you don't show that spurt, then everything else is just posturing, right? Which kind of hit us very, very deeply as well, because like we're all like 30, 33 upwards at that point of time. We're not doing this because it's a garage project or whatever. We intend to make this work, and intend to do like a good job of it. But you could see ki, like with a bunch of like YC founders, because everybody's like 23, 25 and stuff like that. And everybody's got like, some really brilliant idea. But they really don't mean for much until you force yourself to grow, and not just to like make the sale, but like, say ki, boss, this week, and you basically have every 2 weeks you catch up on a growth trajectory, right? So every 2 weeks you're forced to show ki, like there's been growth, and it's just like, and it's brutal, right? Because our group partner, apart from Tim Brady, is Michael Siebel, CEO of Twitch, right? And he is ruthless, man. Like if you see his videos on YouTube, and you think that is like brutal or like extremely honest, he is twice as like brutal with his group companies. So you would literally go in there, like, I mean, come on. I mean, we've all worked at like some fairly like senior spot, right? Like I used to work with Baiju and I mean, through the whole IIT rigor and all of that jazz, right? But honestly, like going up to Michael on like a Monday evening for us, it was Monday morning for him. And you got like shit numbers, you've grown like, 15% or like 8% or something like that. And you're trying to say like, but we tried this, but we tried this. And it's just like, I just don't see it in your graph or something, it's just like, it's freaking painful. And obviously he does it for a reason. Like after I see like, he was an absolute sweetheart. He was just like super nice about the things, just like, or dude, I mean, in the in our way of the scene, like, dude, kya chal raha hai? Chal beer marta hai types, complete switch, right? But through YC, it just like forces you to grow. And the thing with forcing you to grow is you suddenly realize ki, like what is absolutely not required. Right? Like to date, I don't think like our About Us has been updated to have better team photos or कि like सबका description होगा उस पे. ये सब हुआ ही नहीं है, because we're just like, that doesn't matter if like, the scheduler is down and I can't anticipate like, more folks. If 80 people, join this class right now, right, and I'm not able to grow to a class to do 80 people, it doesn't matter ki like, if, whatever, Varshini or whatever doesn't have a name on my About Us page. So it kind of like, so I think that I think was like fairly useful, because also I think another thing with this thing is when you're flush with a bunch of cash, right, you're just like, मैं तो कुछ भी कर लूंगा, like I'll be a really pretty page, right? बहुत बढ़िया होगा, right? And YC just like, clears away a bunch of that fluff and says ki the only thing that matters is that graph that you show us on Monday evening. Baki like तुम देख लो जो भी करना. Have time to have some lunch, that's your problem. So, yeah, that was fairly good. And yeah, I agreed on the networks, like very good networks. Like I think every month there's some YC get together in Bombay or Bangalore or whatever, and this thing, and more than anything, I think it's the same thing. Like your college friends, these are people you suffered with, so there's that bond that you can just call them up and be like, बहुत खराब चल रहा है bro, and just like
अपने माइकल से बात करिए.
हाँ, अभी माइकल से मीटिंग से निकल रहा हूँ. Like बहुत मारी है मेरी. So it's good, but again, like, no, this thing, this thing, they openly tell you ki like this work, and that's something you can't like replace.
So Kaustubh, obviously running a startup comes with its own share of challenges, and we have understood that more than enough in the last 56 minutes. You need all hands on deck, right? And with respect to hiring, when you hire people, and in general, not just specific to, let's say, product or like engineers, is there like a specific set of qualities or criteria you look at? Because early stage hiring would be very different from when you hired at BYJU'S, right?
Yeah, massively.
Yeah. So if you have like a specific set of model ki, hey, when I hired for Spark Studio at a certain stage, we used to look at ABC, and my guess is obviously the hiring at BYJU'S and looking for a very specific product competency would be a very different sort of problem altogether.
Yeah.
So how do you sort of differentiate between the two? And
yeah, I mean, without going into like what I do, there was I learned this at like one of the companies that I worked at before, right? Company called Labs Daily, right? And also IT founders, right? This thing IT Bombay, chaps Matrix funded and everything. And I think at one point we again got flushed with cash, and they said ki chalo abhi jaake like thoda hiring karta hai, you know, IT IIM say. So I was tasked with going to IT and picking up like some folks and everything, and somebody else was going to the IIMs or whatever. And they picked up I think some 16 folks from IIMs, complete waste I think, but like this thing, the IT guys that we got, like the founder basically took me to the side and said ki bhai tu kya karega wahan pe. So I said, pata nahi, hire the brightest and the best, what else, you know? He said, don't be an idiot, okay? Tu wahan jaake get the six GPA guys. So I said, why do you want the 6 GPA guys? You know, like, you know, don't we want the 8 and the 9s? You know, unpe to fight ho rahi hai. He said, bhai, wo sab like they'll ask for like a crazy package. 2 they won't stick around because they are 9 GPA guys. उनको like कल Microsoft में हो जाएगा, ठीक है? We want the 6-year-old guys जो like 4 साल से सिर्फ घिसा रहे हैं या फूक रहे हैं या like रूम पे बैठ के कोडिंग कर रहे हैं, ठीक है? Those are the guys that are going to like you know, stick around for longer, and they're the guys who will be interested in building something. Right, and I thought that was like fairly interesting. I don't know, we got 6 GPA guys, then we got 7 or something, right? But we got some very like sorted guys who liked being with us more than anything, right? These were guys that you could like, you know, go down for chai with, you know, call on the weekend and said ki like aake baith ke like mere ghar aaja, like ye problem solve karni hai, right? And even in Spark Studio we've got like exactly that mix of folks, right? Like my head of design that I got from BYJU'S is somebody that like I actually hang out with, right? Like we will go and like spend Friday evening or like Sunday morning or something together.
Correct.
Like my analyst it literally helped me set up my bookshelf yesterday, right? He just came over and he set up like because like my back.
You're taking too much advantage of the 6 point.
No. that wasn't what I meant. Yeah, like, yeah, sorry. Intern. So like that, it's just like I mean those relationships are different, right? Like when you're a startup,
Correct.
Startup, it's just belief, right? He's the thing, and like he's happy to do this with me because we both like learn something about each other, like which books are going into which shelf tells him a lot about who I am. So this thing, but it's basically investment in the company, obviously, but this early on, it's usually investment in the person, right? Do I like actually believe Kaustubh is like going to do something, or is he full of shit and just like, you know, and I'm here for the money? Because it could be also about the money, right? Like if you're flush with cash and you want to like, you know, throw it around or whatever, you could get like some of this thing. But personally, I've always felt like the team and the core team is somebody that you can actually like spend an inordinate amount of time with and not get like, you know, freaking irritated, right? And of course we like clash and we have a bunch of mixed opinions, etc. But is it all like resolvable, and do you respect the person enough? Because the last thing you want in this sort of setup is some amount of, you know, autocratic behavior, or, you know, I'm going to go tell you this and then you're going to do exactly that. I just need like sharp people who will just go and do stuff, like and get stuff. So so slightly different than back at BYJU'S, because at BYJU'S like I had an insane budget. I could like go get whoever I wanted from wherever I wanted, and you know, didn't have to think about it. I was effecting some of the greatest hikes internally and everything. So different this thing. And of course there was also still superb guys that we've got at BYJU'S, some of the best people I've worked with. But it is slightly different than where we are right now. And oddly enough, I think one of the proof of the pudding was one of my favorite PMs at BYJU'S. I couldn't hire at Spark because I just couldn't afford him anymore. I was just like, I can't pay this salary, and like it literally broke all our hearts because my head of engineering wanted him, and you know, my design head wanted him, and he was also like, it's an interesting problem. But I was like, dude, I'll pick you up in a couple of years or a little later down the road. So yeah.
Right. Just add on to what you said about hiring 6 and 7 pointers, right?
Yeah.
I have a bias towards hiring them because they are okay with the unknown.
Yeah.
People with 8 or 9, or let's say more than 9 GPA, they're probably not that comfortable with the unknown.
Yeah,
right.
they've never failed, and it's a problem, right? If they hit a problem they can't solve, they lose it, I think. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
People with 6, let's say, I don't want to use the word 6 pointer, but yeah, people with lesser GPA, they're cool with, कि हाँ यार ठीक है, solve हो जाएगा, देखते हैं इसे.
Yeah.
Maybe more like a nothing to lose sort of an attitude. That's when you probably give your best.
No, makes sense. Yeah, no, I've seen some of these people just like go so hard at a problem.
Yeah, exactly.
And then come back, and rather than telling me it can't be solved because nobody
can't
else
be solved. Correct.
Like me has solved this problem. Yeah, makes sense.
What are 5 pointers, guys?
I don't think the GPA itself like matters, right? Like I can't, like, honestly, I can't recall like when I've seen that GPA last or said ki this thing. I usually look at the experience and says ki has this person done something interesting, can be leveraged, or fits what I want this PM to do. So yeah.
So Kaustubh, largely sort of coming outside, you have had very specific experiences in Edtech, and I'm pretty sure you're so close to the sector. The K-12 space is rapidly changing, right? Obviously, ChatGPT kicking in, and every year, like with the advent of technology, how do you leverage like new pieces that like give you new opportunities? While obviously a lot of positive news is there in the market, you also see, at least I know a very close friend who had started something in the same space, so like my batchmate, and he said the K-12 space is not mature and monetization was like a major problem for him. Looking into your context, I understand you have crossed that 0 to 1 barrier. It's like a stable setup is what I understand. Now 1 to 100. Like, what is your next set of challenges that you, as in Spark Studio, is going after?
So I'd say that the monetization and I mean, it basically in EdTech, it's always been coming down to CAC, right? And when the sector was flush with this thing, nobody asked a question about CAC, right? But in the last 2 years, it's just been, that's literally the first question we get asked, and it's brutal, right? And for us, I think, I mean, it worked both ways, because when we started, people said you're too late. Right, ki this thing, these XYZ people are already there, etc. But then what we saw is that a bunch of them got wiped out, right? And then the people who came after that and still before us, they didn't get like funding, because they just went after like a growth graph at all cost kind of this thing approach. So we're basically learning a lot from these guys, and in the last year, and a bunch of people have just said, just stay in cockroach mode and continue to this thing. I think one of the major pieces that you learn at YC is pre-PMF and post-PMF. Right? What does PMF look like, and are you there yet? And oddly enough, even now, if you like, but now the landscape has changed, not just from the growth perspective. I still know a bunch of YC companies that are growing decently, but the focus on education has changed so much to say, hey, are you still doing live class? Are you still doing this rudimentary model scheduling and WhatsApps and whatever, or are you actually building a product that will that's leveraging AI? Because that's the thing. So I won't say we've necessarily solved it, but the new piece that we're building on the app is primarily self-based learning in a judgment-free environment with a character that truly understands what the child is saying. And so for us, the next wave is going to be, how do we get a AI tutor that this child loves hanging out with, right? This thing, where's that 6 and 7 GPA tutor who's going to teach me ye karna and like stay at it, right? Like that's the main thing, because we want that confidence building bit. We want them to stay hungry, try different things. Now with most of the LLMs, that's something that's within view. We can do that, but how do you do it in a fun enough, judgment-free environment that still is good enough for a parent? So I'd say while the live class piece is still going quite well, and that'll continue through whichever organic / other ways that we want to do it. For us, I think the real product journey has now begun, because now is when like every day is just like, okay, what happened in this session, right? Like what happened with this user, right? And is it representative or not? So that bit, and the other forcing function is obviously because this funding winter, so on and so forth. We're going to have to get very crafty with it, right? It's not let's burn $10,000 on this experiment kind of a thing, but how do you really say, hey, this 100 users is going to be representative of this sample, and this kind of works, and let's go all guns once we've hit some PMF or some monetization on this. So I wouldn't say we're 1 to 100 on some problems. We're still 0 to 1 on some problems, and the good thing is that we're still nimble, and the team like comes and builds bookshelves and shows up for work every day. So that's the important bit.
Awesome. Yeah. One last question before we wrap up. How do you define product market fit? Maybe how does YC define it? Right. You could probably talk to us about it.
Yeah, I think I mean the YC definition is fairly standard. It's out there as well. It's all on revenue, right? Do you have a pocket of users that is going to give you revenue at a CAC that makes sense, and is that TAM big enough for you to go after, and not like just this one set of one village sitting there, and once you finish that village, there's nothing else.
Correct.
Right. So PMF and this thing for YC, it's always been about the money, and I think that's the only real metric, right? Key this thing, and for us, that literally involved like saying, hey, we won't do art, for instance, because my PMF banne nahi wala.
Nahi banne wala.
Right? Like I can do it, right? I can sell classes at $100 and compete with neighboring auntie. Right. I dekho mere, I've hit 10,000 paying users at $100, but it makes no sense, right? Because I'm acquiring it like at a ridiculous amount. Maybe my CAC will come down because suddenly it's $100 and like all my funnels on the landing page go through the roof, right? But this thing, but is that like going to sustain, and is this child am I going to continue to do it? Unit economics is screwed up. I'll never make money off of this, right? So this seems like more of a 2019 kind of a growth strategy than a 2023 kind of a growth strategy. We just can't afford that sort of thing anymore. You really need to prove if you're in communications, the money is in communications, you're able to find it or tap it at a CAC that makes sense, and there's enough of it, right? And you've figured out some distribution for it, or you've got endless supply in some other manner. That's kind of it, right? So everything else is just vanity metrics if you can't do the money part.
Awesome, yeah. Thank you so much, Kaustubh, for spending 1 hour with us.
Yeah. Well, was it an hour? Have you been on this for an hour? Wow, nice.
More than an hour, I'd say.
More than an hour. Nice. Got it. Awesome.
I had a wonderful time, man. Thank you for recording this with us, and I'm pretty sure I'll go over the recordings and a lot of those snippets again.
Super, man. Glad to be of help. Yeah.